Welcome to the Aiming Five Hole podcast with Phil and Ryan. Hey Ryan, how you doing?
Doing well, Phil. Doing
Happy New
well.
Year. Our first
Thanks. And
episode of 2025.
absolutely, we're coming in hot. I feel like we're in got a lot to talk about. I feel like
Yeah.
we're almost halfway through the season. It's
It's
time to
incredible with the
revisit.
yeah, it's incredible what they had with the compressed schedule that all of a sudden most teams are hovering around that 40, 41 game mark, except for seems like Tampa Bay is lingering back there a little bit, but everybody this week will hit that midseason mark a little earlier than normal. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the first half of the season, then we can
But
talk about what happened in the second half. What's going to
absolutely. But
happen in the
before
second
we
half.
before we get to that, I
Oh,
just thought, and we
here it
didn't talk
comes.
about this. We didn't talk about this in the prep at all. But I thought maybe we should do a 2 minute postmortem on the juniors and
Oh,
Canada's awful exit.
oh, you know what? It's this is painful. This is where I might need I might be on your couch
You
today.
might be on my
I'm
couch.
gonna borrow the couch. As I said last week, this tournament to me is the most exciting. I love the tournament. I love the passion of the players, not just the Canadian players, but of all of them. And I think we talked about it earlier that the other nations have caught up to Canada in terms of how they care about this tournament.
Yeah.
So it's just harder for Team Canada now. It's no excuse. They didn't play well right from the get-go.
And they didn't go with the best team they could have.
No, and
They were
yeah,
not a very,
no. They tried to pick the right team in terms of positional offense, defense, goaltending. But I you know what? All that aside, if they're going to take 30 minute more penalty minutes than the closest team, you're not going to win this tournament. We talked about it last week. The officiating in the international play is so different and way more um, random than and tighter than the National Hockey League and in the what happens in the Canadian Hockey League. And if you take that many penalties, it's going to bite you. It's almost fitting that a penalty in the last minute of the game they needed to win was going to be what did them in. And I think
yeah,
that's what did them in. They couldn't score on 4-on-4, 5-on-5, and they couldn't score, and they were taking way too many penalties. And that's what did them
yep,
in.
yeah. It was pretty disheartening to watch. Pretty
Yeah.
disheartening to watch. Now now we've got the Americans to root for or against in the final.
Against,
I don't know.
Finland getting in there was nice to see. Beating the Swedes in overtime, it was nice. So you know what, I'm part of American. I know I'm living in the States, but I have a problem with rooting for the American team.
Yeah. By the way, does anybody have a better job than Cole Eiserman on the American team as the 13th forward? He sits on the bench the whole time. They get a power play. They send him out there to just shoot. What a
Yeah,
great gig!
yeah,
If you can get
absolutely,
paid for that in the
absolutely.
NHL, that's a nice
No,
career.
no, yeah, and the Czechs lost today to the Swedes
In the bronze medal
in the
game.
bronze medal game. So we have a bronze medal winner, the Czechs. But you know what? Like
Okay.
I don't like the last statement for me on this is I don't like all the negative stuff that people are saying in social media about the kids and the players. These kids play their hearts out. They're not getting
Yeah.
paid to do this. They
Well, they didn't
care.
practice their hearts out. That
No,
was
they
the
didn't
other thing that I
practice.
was surprised to hear about. What do you mean they didn't practice? You
Yeah,
you spend all this time trying to assemble the right team with the right roles, and then you don't actually practice to send
well,
everybody. If you're going to do that, just get the 20 most skilled guys.
right. Well, they
If you're
also
not going to practice, just get this 20 most skilled
well,
guys and let them have at it.
I think part of the problem this year was Cameron was I wouldn't say last minute, but a fill-in coach because he wasn't supposed to be the coach this year. He filled in because and I forget the gentleman's name, was supposed to be the coach, got an NHL assistant coaching job. So went to the
Right.
NHL and couldn't coach in this tournament. So um, it's unfortunate. So it was a little bit of a shambles this year. And again, I don't like what people are saying online about them. These kids played their hearts out. They didn't play well or as a team and took too many penalties. But you know what? Canada can't win every year.
No.
And it just fuels the fire for next year
Yeah.
and hopefully
The other thing I
changes the
think
mindset.
Canada, I also think they're going to have to take a big, deep look at how they select the players,
Yes.
and not just the players for the final roster, but the players for some of the the showcases and And
Right.
the other sort of intra squad tournaments where they select the team because there's a bias against Canadian kids playing at U.S. colleges, which is a terrible thing. That
Yes.
can't last. There are players that could absolutely help that team in a big way playing in
Yes.
the U.S. colleges, and just because they're not playing in the juniors doesn't mean that they shouldn't get a long hard look to join the
I agree.
national team.
I agree. And at least get called to come in to the summer showcase and the summer, not showcase, but summer camp and evaluation camp and whatnot. But
Yeah,
you know what? It's over, unfortunately. It didn't end the way we wanted it this year. 2 years in a row losing to the Czechs with a goal in the last minute of a game is heartbreaking. But you know what? We can turn our focus to the new year. We'll get another chance
Four Nations.
for a Nations Challenge, which we can talk about when we talk about the second half of the season, which I'm really looking forward to. But let's
Yep,
start looking back. Like, how
yep.
are we feeling about the first part of the season? There's a lot of surprises that sort of happened. What stands out to you from the first half of the season? What is your big takeaway from the first half of the season? Whether
Okay.
that's anybody or your Habs, my Leafs, the NHL. What is your big takeaway?
No, so look, there are like 67 things I could talk about. In terms of the first half of the season. The things that to me, are the most notable in terms of good things there are four. Um, Number one is Washington. The Washington Capitals just continue to blow me away with that
Amazing.
roster. And the fact that they did it retooling on the fly, I thought they weren't going to make the playoffs this year. I thought Alex Ovechkin had hit a wall and was never really going to be able to perform like he had, and it was going to be a 20-goal season at best. And he's already there, just about. What is he at, 19 now?
19. Yeah, well, yeah.
Having missed all those games. First of all, he's like a million years old, and he recovers from a broken fibula in like
6 weeks.
4 weeks, six
5
weeks. I mean,
weeks.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
It's
crazy.
Well, like,
Um,
it's just crazy. Like you said, we didn't think they were going to be able to score goals, and they're plus 41. They're third
yeah,
overall.
yeah,
And they're second in goals for in the league,
yeah,
behind only
and
the Jets, who are smoking everybody.
yeah. I would have thought Pierre-Luc Dubois would be a fourth liner for them already. He's actually playing quite
I
well
think you
under
were
the
calling
circumstance.
for his trade. What you were actually making predictions on when he would be traded out of the Washington before the
Yeah,
season was over.
or buyout or sent down because he wasn't going to clear waivers at that salary. I just it blows my mind that everything that they tried as an offseason move has worked out for them.
Yeah, you got to wonder
Including
when this bubble's going to break. And Logan Thompson, like, did we ever talk about Logan Thompson and ever before? And he's
well, I
staying
mean,
on his head
he had great moments in Vegas, but those were great moments. I mean, he's standing on his head every night.
with a
Eh,
world-class defensive group in front of him.
well,
In Vegas. In Vegas.
yeah, in Vegas. But well, speak of Washington, I mean, who saw Jacob Chikrin's revival? I mean, look, he was still a solid defenseman.
So
It's
is
not like
Ottawa
he was a.
regretting trading him away or getting rid of him at the end of last season?
You know what? No one plays well enough. it's,
You called it though, them making the playoffs right now.
they're
That's
finding their game. They're definitely finding their
yeah.
game. I think the funny thing is like, look, I thought Stutzler was going to be have a great season and take another step forward, and I thought Jake Sanderson was going to have another step forward year, and he kind of has. I did not see like Drake Batherson becoming the second best player on the team though, and he's played really, really well. He just he's one of those guys that you just sort of notice when he's on the ice. He's
Right.
physical. He's always in the right place, picking off. Those guys who just seem to always pick off passes. You don't know how the hell they got in the middle of it. And he's
Right.
one of those guys.
Is that
Just
coaching or is that just the
That's
team? Is
just a
that
player.
just a player?
Just a player. That when it comes to him, that player
Well,
just
in terms
sort
of
of
him
figures
standing
it
out
out.
this season, do you think it's just
Yeah.
him, or do you think that the new surroundings, the coaching there has just helped him? Because he's got Green there in terms of the coach who's a gritty player, was an underdog himself to some degree type player.
Yeah.
Does that help
Look,
a guy like him?
I think it does. I think it does. But at the same time, I think I think players sometimes, especially with like players who are not necessarily late blooming, because Batherson has been no stretch a late bloomer. He's right in his development period. but I feel like sometimes players have a few good things happen to them and they see like a particular style or a particular read in the flow of play works and does something good. And so you try that again and it
Mm,
works. And then you sort of develop a new a new aspect of your hockey sense and your hockey intelligence. And that becomes almost like a brand for you over
right.
time. In the same way that I don't want to get ahead of myself by any stretch of the imagination, but lately Kirby Doc has gotten confidence back. A couple of good things.
You've made a
Lucky goals went in
360
for
on
him.
him from the first podcast to today. You've like made a
He's got
complete,
a long
so I
way to
shouldn't
go.
say 360, 180 and gone.
Yeah, like
You were like calling
he's
for his head at the beginning of the season too.
yeah, but he's like he's it's one of those things where he started finding a few things that worked, and that has given him confidence, and so he goes back to the well on those things over and over again. But he starts expanding his game, and then his aggressive stick handling and zone entry. He was a zone entry disaster and a neutral zone disaster at the beginning of the year, and now it feels like he's dangling three guys on every rush and then finding somebody open. It's
Do,
great to
do,
see.
do you think, and we talked about this numerous times, but
Mm-hmm.
Lane has changed that team by coming back because guys like Kirby Doc probably felt, and Caulfield and Suzuki probably had too much weight on their shoulders trying to carry this team forward. Then you add a talented player like him, and some of the focus goes off of him, especially with his start. He started so quickly that everybody started focusing on Lane. All these other guys around him now all of a sudden found their game.
Yeah, I, I
And
think I think that's true. It's also, I think, probably a little bit of the you bring in a guy like that who plays so comfortably on a first or second line, and it allows second, third, fourth line guys to slot more where they belong.
right,
And so they're playing the kind of minutes against the kind of competition that they probably should be.
right.
Um, but
Well,
the guy, if I'm talking about the Habs for a second, I don't want to spend too much time on the Habs
Well, here,
because this is
so
a
before,
league
because I
wide
know
thing.
before you go on with the Habs, because I want you to make this part of your comments, because
Yeah.
you made a comment at the beginning of this season that you
Yep.
were frustrated that they weren't taking that step forward. As we now look to the first half of the season that's complete, where they're
Yep.
sitting in the standings, they've made some strides. Lane's back. Lane's back. He's doing well. Have they turned, do you believe they've turned that corner? You don't have to answer that right now, but as you're answering about your Habs, does that fit into your equation of where they sit
Yes.
after the first season, first
Yeah.
half?
Look, I said they'd be a 500 team, right? At the end of the season, they're a 500 team now. They're pretty much exactly where I expected. Now, the route they're taking to get there was not what I expected. I thought it would be sort of more consistent win one, lose one all the way along.
Seven and
Do I
three in their
think they're,
last 10.
yeah, do I think they're a 700 team the rest of the way? Of course not.
No.
Of course not. But do I think that they could be a 550 team the rest of the way and like keep things interesting from a playoff perspective? It's possible. I think they'll be in the mix for that. There'll be some ups and downs along the way, and they'll give some games away like they did against Chicago this week. But they're looking more dangerous on the forecheck. They're finding the game that I think Martin St. Louis wants them to play.
Right.
And it's a forechecking game. It's a very cerebral game. It's simple, but it's cerebral in terms of when are you being creative and when are you being structured.
Right.
But and then there's been some pleasant surprises. I've said before, Josh Anderson in a penalty killing role is something I never thought I'd see, but he's playing a heavy game. It's great to see him playing a heavy game. It was nice to see Arbor Jacki rediscover how to play the game. I think he was in his head a little bit at the
He
beginning of
stopped
the
fighting
season.
as much as well, I think.
Well, he beat up Pat Maroon
Yeah, the other night. Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
the
But
other night,
but
which
you
was
haven't
nice to
seen
see.
as many of those
Yeah,
highlights recently, him doing
but
stupid things.
yeah, and look, you can talk about the first line and all that all you want, but the guy I want to highlight is the pleasant surprise, and it's so kind of obvious. I'm not shedding light on anything new here. Is Emil Heineman in a fourth line role has 10 goals on the year, is third in rookie scoring. Um, and the sort of unsung hero. By the way, he's the prospect they got back in the Tyler Toffoli trade.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
that's turning out to look like a really, really great move. This kid
that's
could
right.
play up in the lineup. There's no reason he couldn't be a second
It's
line
good to
player the
have,
way he plays.
but it's good to have spread out scoring like that. And he might not score as much on the top lines because then then he's distributing the puck a little bit more. I think also playing on the fourth line, you're playing against different set of players, potentially getting out there against.
Possibly, but
Oh, yeah,
his
yeah,
shot is
absolutely.
really good. He's not getting those like tip in, lucky rebound goals. They're
Yeah,
all full value, like wrist
yeah,
shots from the dots and
yeah.
stuff like that. He's really good.
That's great.
Um, uh,
Any other standouts for this season, other whether it's Habs or other things like?
so Winnipeg,
Is that
and
surprising to you? To me,
it was. I
I'm
thought
not
they
as
were a boy.
surprised. I knew they're a good team.
I thought they were, a 92, 93 point team. They're playing ahead of that.
Yeah.
Um,
To me, and we'll talk about it when I get to my side of the equation, is that the Jets and the Leafs to me are both similar
like regular season teams.
regular season teams, and it's not about the regular season for them this year. It's all about the playoffs.
Yeah.
Both of these teams were going to make the playoffs this year. We figured, we given how good their teams
Oh
are,
yeah. I knew
goaltending,
they were going to make the playoffs. I just
but it's
didn't
all
think that
about
they
the
were going to
playoffs for
score like
them.
this.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did
no
not think they were
question.
going to score like this. And the
And
other team
beating
that
teams the way
surprised
they're
me,
beating teams. They're smoking
yeah,
people.
they're
They're
smoking
smoking
teams.
people.
And the other team that really took me by surprise, other than Washington, was Minnesota. I think, like, I saw them. I didn't see them this good. They are a strong, strong team,
They're a
top to
hard team to
bottom.
play against. I said that
Yeah.
early in the season that they were my surprise in terms of how hard to play against. We all both believed they were going to be playoff team, but how hard it is to play against that team. And I don't see a lot of them out here in the East,
Yeah.
except when they're playing my Leafs or someone in the East, I get clinch a glimpse. But the few games I've seen of them, man, they are a tough team to play against. They hit, they skate, they shoot,
Yeah.
they're just
I'm
oh,
I'm curious to see, where where they finish in the playoffs in terms of, I think Gustafson a good goalie, but
right.
is he a playoff goalie?
Yeah.
We'll see about all of that. We'll see
They're
about
another
all of
team
that.
though that needs to prove it in the playoffs, right? They've
Yeah,
bowed out pretty quickly in the playoffs the last few years too. So,
yeah. I don't want to
um,
talk about. I don't want to talk about disappointments because we've been ragging on Nashville, Buffalo, and New York for the last 3 weeks. Um,
look, they've
but
got
in
to be
terms
the
of
biggest.
individual,
Those three. Sorry, I'll go. Predators and Rangers have got to be the biggest disappointments
the
for
biggest
this season. No
disappointments.
question. No question.
So I do also want to call out a couple things. I don't know if I want to call it a surprise, but I do want to just call out, a few players, who are performing exceedingly well. When you thought, you know, are they really these sort of are they really perennial all stars? And at the top of that list was Sam Reinhart, and it turns out, yeah, the dude's a perennial all star now.
It's
Like
crazy.
we thought it was a fluky season once, and then maybe a semi fluky season the next, and now he's leveling up. It's if it's possible. Like the
He's
guy's a
found his
super duper
stride. There's
star.
no question. He's found a game. He's found a comfortable situation. Players around him, they all seem to, that team just seems to mold together. We've talked about it till we're blue in the face. This team is still a four-line juggernaut team that just seems to fit well together. And you got to give a little bit of that to the coach, how he has put this team
Yep.
together, how he coaches them, how he plays them. He's a great coach and he's been doing it for
Yeah.
a long time.
But
So
yeah, another Buffalo Saber
yeah,
found
absolutely.
his stride
You know what?
somewhere
I'm
else.
surprised, and this is where I'll give you a little gears because you're sitting there on the West Coast. I'm shocked. One of your surprises of the season, because we both said it from the beginning that this team wasn't going to make the playoffs, that the Kings isn't one of your surprises. How well they're doing in the
Yeah.
West in that tough division, with Edmonton, Vegas, them, it just
So here's the
Vancouver.
interesting thing.
They
Here's
without
the
Doughty, they're doing this without Doughty and without good goaltending.
Yeah. Although their goaltending's sort of been better than people thought.
Well, we're surprised. That's what I'm saying. But
Yeah,
they,
Kemper's playing
yeah,
well.
they're
But
playing over
here,
their heads.
but the funny thing, whenever I watch the Kings, I should be surprised. I should be like, wow, there's something about the way they're playing that kind of makes it look sort of inevitable. Like a they play this very aggressive game that just sort of wears people down. They're like they don't they're not they're not the neutral zone trap team from last year where you just said they've got skill but they're not using it. They're not really a threat. And then you've seen a whole bunch of things happen this year where it's like, yeah, actually that kind of makes sense.
Right.
Their top four on D is pretty strong. Quentin Byfield took the next step in his
Well, we talked about that early in
maturation.
the season. Was he going
Yeah,
to take that step? And he did. And he
he's
seems
a
to be doing it.
and he's a beast
Yeah.
doing it too. Like, he'll dangle you, but also knock you on your ass the last second before shooting it past your
Yeah,
goal.
absolutely.
Like, yeah, they are, they're going to make some. I don't think they're necessarily, the first round exit team that, people are
No.
sort of pegging them as. I think they're going to play a style of hockey that's tough if their goaltending continues to hold up. And Kemper has shown that he can do it in the
Well,
playoffs.
right now, if you playoff started today, they're playing Edmonton. Do you pick them over Edmonton?
I don't pick anybody over Edmonton. They were my preseason
there,
pick.
yeah, absolutely.
They were
So,
my preseason pick, and I still think that they're going to do
yeah,
some damage at the
yeah,
deadline to shore up
yes,
the D. So,
yeah, hopefully in
um,
net too. No
yes,
more
yes, Skinner.
consistency in the net. But that,
Yeah,
that's you've nailed a lot of my surprises. Obviously, Washington. We've talked into our blue in the face about the Rangers and the Predators and what a mess both organizations are, especially the Rangers. Um, but and the Kings were one of my big surprises. The other one that is a surprise for me. It's much along what you said about your Habs early in the season. I'm really shocked because I picked both the teams to make the playoffs, potentially make the playoffs, is that Detroit and Buffalo didn't turn the corner this year. Like that's a little bit of a shock of how they've regressed and gone backwards. Buffalo showed some promise there for a little while and they've sunk back and they're back being Buffalo, unfortunately.
well,
And Vinny
okay.
Ruff
So
hasn't been able to turn this team around with the young talent they've got on this team. I'm just surprised at how bad they've gone and how they've gone backwards.
yeah, no, I don't disagree, especially with the amount of like stud young defensemen they're supposed to have.
Yeah,
Owen Power did not turn
Darlene's
into
been
the
injured for a big part of the first half of the
yeah,
season, but
but Owen
still.
Power hasn't turned into like the next big superstar. But
Too much pressure on
I'm
him,
going
too
to go
much
back.
putting too much on his back.
Yeah, I'll go back to Detroit one more time
We
because
had
you
this conversation last week. I wanted to
we
hear it
did.
again.
I'm going to go back to it one more time, and I'm gonna put it to you a little bit different.
They've won four
You
in a row,
take
by the way.
I get it, I get it, I get it, but you take away Raymond, Larkin, DeBrinket, and Kane and Moritz Seider, and who's a player you're scared of on that team?
Uh, There's not. That's the problem.
Right. They're just not that deep an organization. They're not that deep a team, and I'm not scared of them at all. If the Canadians had the absolute like powerhouse second half of the season and somehow made the playoffs, and the Detroit made the playoffs as well, which is
Not
impossible.
happening.
They're probably fighting for the same spot. But like, who is the team that I would want the Canadians to play in the first round? Detroit,
Detroit.
100%,
Yeah. Yeah.
hundred
No, I get
percent.
it. No, I get it. No, I agree. They've been a Detroit. But the other thing I would before we go on to the some other the things that I have on my list because I had like you, I made a list and it was like I couldn't believe how long it started getting. But I got to talk a little bit about the Leafs in the first half and to what you just said. And we talked about injuries and stuff. The storyline for me with the Leafs has been they're definitely playing a different style of hockey, which has been good. And with the amount of injuries and games lost to star players like Matthews, Nyes was out for a while, McCabe has been
Mm-hmm.
out for a while, Stolarz has been gone for a month. Um, the fact that we keep winning, we're ahead, we're leading the Atlantic Division, um, and playing well. You've heard enough of my tweets and my conversations that we have off before in between these podcasts of how they get sloppy and at times they start playing well and but this new style of hockey that Brube's got them playing has been able to show the depth that they've got and no matter who's on the ice he's getting them to play a style that seemingly is working for them and hopefully that carries them through into the playoffs. We'll talk about the second half of the season in a bit, but I'm happy to say that they've They've definitely showing me something in the first half of the season, and some of the moves that they made in the offseason, Stolhart's being the biggest one. I said this last week. It's with if Stolhart's comes back and is healthy the second half of the season, he's unquestionably the number one goalie, and he's starting if I'm the coach of this team in the playoffs.
The dude's a star.
Yeah.
He was
And
he was an unsung star in Florida,
yeah.
and was sort of an unfortunate casualty to Bobrovsky getting super hot, but the
Yeah.
man's a star.
The other thing, and you said this in a text to me this week, so I had to write it down. And when we were going back and forth, is Edmonton had such a slow start to the season, which surprised me after their
Colorado too.
yeah, Colorado. But then McKinnon and Leon Draisaitl are becoming the superstars we knew they were. McKinnon leading the league in points. Draisaitl's on a 14 game point streak, scoring 27 points in that time frame, 12 goals, 15 assists. Amazing. Like these two
Like
are just rising above. It's just amazing.
I look,
Great
I,
storyline.
you hate to like leave defensemen out of the conversation, but I'll do it because. But like when you talk about the top three players in the world, how do you not say McKinnon, McDavid, and Draisaitl? Like who
I don't
else could
know.
it be? I mean,
I don't
yeah,
know.
Kucherov. I don't think Kucherov is in Draisaitl's
No, Kucherov to me is still a
orbit,
one way player, right? He's going one
and,
direction.
and whiny as hell.
Yeah, he's
It's
not my
hard to get
favorite
past the
player.
whininess,
He's not my
but
favorite player.
yeah, I like. We're looking back on the first half of the season, looking forward to the second half of the season, and I will say this, and I will to the till the cows come home. Leon Draisaitl is like a top three player in the world, and he does not get the recognition he
No, no
deserves.
question. No question. Look at in the playoffs, if they're going to do something in the playoffs, it's going to have to be him and McDavid again to ride this team. Because like we said at the beginning of the season, letting Holloway and
Robert go.
Broberg go was probably one of their biggest mistakes at the end of last season because they're shining in St. Louis, could be used on this team right now. But the other thing before we go on to the second half of the season, because we got to move on a little bit because we're probably running long. That will say again because it's West Coast, and I'm surprised you didn't mention even though Celebrini has missed a bunch of time, he's still only 1 point behind in the rookie scoring race, and right now is the rookie of the year. Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of him play, but some of the highlights I've seen of him, he is dazzling as much as everybody thought he was going to be, and he's going to be the player that we all think he's going to be.
Yep. Yeah, he's great. I
And we
don't
can leave it
watch
right
a lot of
there.
Sharks games. I don't see much more of him than you do, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
But he's going to be he's definitely going to be a star. All right, so let's look ahead to the second
Second
half of the
half.
season.
What do you
What do
think is
you
going to
expect?
happen? What do you think are some storylines that you expect to happen or you think will happen?
Um, I think the Four Nations Cup is going to have an unpredictable impact on some of the more star-driven teams in the league. And
What do you mean
so,
by that? What do you
so these guys are going to be involved in a short but highly intense
highly
tournament,
entertaining?
highly entertaining but highly intense tournament in the middle of the season. And if you look at the teams that have the most representatives, it could cause them to have a little bit of a blip for the first week or two after the tournament. And so you look at
Kind of a point, isn't it, this
Toronto.
tournament, you think?
Well, you look at Toronto, you look at Vegas. Especially Vegas has like a ton of players.
So does
um,
Florida. So does
and
Florida.
so does Florida. Like those teams could come back and like play 500 hockey for a couple of weeks or worse, which could cost them in the standings. I
Yep.
mean, it could cost them seeding
Yep.
possibility for the playoffs because I think these players are going to be a little bit tired from the Four Nations. It's a short, intense tournament.
Right.
That's one thing I'm looking at. The other thing I'm looking at is given how many teams are in the mix in the East for the playoffs, I think this could be one of the most interesting trade deadlines in years.
100% agree.
And I think you're
100%. There's going to be
I think
more
you're going to see
teams n- more teams, the way it's shaking out right now, especially in the East, there's more teams vying for spots. And if those teams are in the mix come trade deadline, are they come buyers? And then who's selling? That's the problem. Is there going to be a lack of sellers because of the amount of teams that have a potential to get in? And what teams that are on that brink are going to go, I'm not pushing to get over that line. I'd rather sell off and go for next year. I think that's going to be, to your point, I think that's going to be a huge, interesting storyline as we get to February and the trade deadline.
Yeah, but and I think the other thing that's kind of interesting about it is because you have a lot of teams that are in the mix right now, and they might want to acquire some of them. You might have some surprises as teams that are 2, 3 points out of a playoff spot towards the deadline decide to sell a lot of players. It's like we
Well,
weren't
that's
going
what
to
I'm
make noise
saying.
in the
Like
playoffs anyway, and
Calgary's one
so
of those teams that we talked
yeah,
about who said beginning of the season, they said they were in a rebuilding phase. They're 1 point back, and we said this a few weeks ago. Are they going to be buyers or sellers? Are they going to
they
try
still
and
might sell, and
right?
you're going to have a lot of teams making that decision. And you'll also have some teams, I think, that are kind of in a hybrid mode. Like a team like Montreal could be in a hybrid mode because they're trying to take the next step in their evolution, in their rebuild. And what you might see as a result of that are actual hockey trades at the
Yes,
deadline, and not just rentals for
yes.
picks and prospects. Like you might actually see some hockey trades that are like, you know what, I want to get better now.
Well, I think
And
that's
so,
the salary cap is playing into that as well. I think you're looking at more GMs, and Trev Leaving has said this the same thing. Because if I'm making a trade come to trade deadline, I want a player with term. So, but I
yeah,
think you're right. I think that's a great point in terms of um
I
sorry,
think
go
it's gonna be
ahead.
fascinating. I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating as a trade deadline, and then the then and then you look at the disappointing teams, right? Like, what is Buffalo, New York, and Nashville going to do come the trade deadline? Are
What are
they
the
gonna,
Rangers going to do?
yeah, they're going to jettison things? Are they going to, you keep hearing this weekend, Elliot Friedman keeps hinting that they're making such a huge play for JT Miller. They want him back. That could change up the whole thing for them. I don't know. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, they got to win. They got to win today.
But
Um,
but let's stop on that point because there's two things happening that Friedman mentioned that it's possible that Vancouver trades both of them, JT
oh,
Miller
Patterson too.
and Patterson too. There's a possible they trade both of them and try and clean up the change room and some of the bad crap that's going on in Vancouver. And my prediction might hold true because of all this crap going on there that they're not going to make the playoffs. That you didn't think that was going to happen. But anyway, but if I'm JT Miller, do you want to go walk into New York right now?
Yeah, I do.
You do? I'm not
I
sure I
still have a
want
lot
to.
of I still have a lot of friends there. I still have, a connection to the city of New York. I still like if I'm him, I probably want to go back to New
Really?
York. And he was
Yeah.
loved. He was beloved in New York. The
I'm not sure
second
I'm going
thing
back.
though,
I'm not sure I'm going
the second thing is I don't know how you trade an Elias Pettersson.
back.
These guys like him don't come along every day. Yes, he's having a down year, and he's. Let me draw a big contrast between him and Leon Draisaitl. Leon Draisaitl has a busted shoulder and a bum ankle in the playoffs and still almost leads his team, if not for Connor McDavid in scoring. Elias Pettersson, has a sore pinky and he disappears from the score sheet for 6 weeks. Um,
Swede versus German. Swede versus-
yeah,
Sorry, I'm not being nationalistic at all.
yeah.
I'm
Let's
not being,
let's stereotype things a
not
little bit.
stereotyping at all.
But yeah, he's like
Sorry to
Elias
our
Pettersson
Swedish
is
friends out there. Swede.
he's an all-world player. By the way, I checked our listening logs. We don't have any listeners in
We
Sweden,
might
so I
have
think
one.
we're
Might
safe.
have one.
You might have one.
Might have one in
I,
Toronto. My Swedish friends in Toronto. I
okay.
apologize.
Well, we don't
Yes.
have any in Sweden
No,
proper.
not in Sweden. No, no.
Yeah, we have more listeners in India than we do in Sweden. Um, but look, Elias Pettersson is an all-world player. I don't know how you trade a guy like that without getting something in return that
Yeah,
helps you immediately. And I don't know how you make.
yeah.
I don't know
I
how a
agree.
trade does that. I don't know how a trade does
I agree.
that. what else is coming up before now and the end of
Well,
the year? There's
well, here's
Four
my question.
Nations.
The
Yeah.
other thing, because one other thing I want to hear your comments on and make a prediction here. Do you think the second half of the season, do you think the way Montreal is playing, do you think they get in, squeak their way into that last playoff spot?
No,
No.
I don't.
Do you think
I
Ottawa?
think I think they're going to continue. I think they will. My prediction is that they are going to play decent hockey and they'll be above 500. I think that they'll probably be like an 86, 87 point team. And I think the second wild card will be a 92, 93 point slot.
Right.
Which is, you know,
Right.
it's a good year and it's something to build
Right.
on.
Right.
It's something to build on.
Yeah.
My other prediction, um, this is a very specific prediction.
I'm leaning
I'm
in. I'm
predicting that
leaning in.
I'm predicting that Alex Ovechkin is 3 goals short of the record at the end of the
Wow,
year.
that's very. I mean, you know what? I'm writing that down. 3 goals short.
3 goals, which means he's what? He needs 22 between now and the end of the year. I think that happens. I think he
Three
gets
short.
20. Three short.
I think it's more than that, but if he keeps scoring empty net goals, he might actually get there. He might actually get there.
Well, they're gonna launch him out there every time
They
they're up
do.
a goal or
Did you
two.
not see the other night?
Oh
It
yeah,
was
and
last night or the night before where 2 minutes to go, as soon as the other team pulled the team, you saw somebody beeline to the bench and there was
oh
no
yeah,
question
they
who was
send him
coming
out
on.
there. Oh yeah, and the best part about it is like they send him out there and they're like, all right, you go ahead and play the rest of the game. And
Yeah. He
he's
did. He played
after the
almost three
first
minutes at the end of the game.
after the first 30 seconds of that, he is huffing and puffing, but he ain't coming off.
No, it's
It's
no
like just
no way.
yeah. It's amazing he comes in behind into his own zone. He should just hang out in center
Yeah.
ice and hope
Well,
that the
they
puck
did
chips
have it
out
because it
to
was
him.
against the Rangers. I think this happened. I think they were up by three or two or
Yeah.
three, so it wasn't a chance of losing the game. So I think he's probably
Right.
way more responsible if the game's closer in terms of getting off and not risking a loss because they are doing so well. But I agree. It's going to be intriguing to see what happens. That was one of my storylines for the second half of the season. How close will he get? Will he get there?
Yeah.
We said it from the beginning of the season. It would be wonderful if he made it this year, especially because of how they're doing. Wouldn't it be just a great tie-in story with how Washington's playing? He does it. They make some kind of run in the playoffs. I don't think they're going to win the Stanley Cup, but it'd be kind of fun to see that sort of play itself out in terms
Yeah.
of whatnot.
So here's another prediction question for you.
Oh, sorry.
Before you get to a question for you on a prediction. Do
Yeah.
any more coaches get fired between now and the
Yes.
end of the year?
Yes. Yes. If Laviolette and Burnett make the end of the season, uh, you tell me
This
what
is
I
an
have to do, shave my head, do something stupid. I don't know. These two guys should make buzz. It's actually one of my storylines. How much longer are these two franchises going to let this crap go on, especially what's going on in New York? And we just talked about the trade deadline, how intriguing it's going to be, and the number of decisions the Rangers need to make in terms of their future. Are they going
Yep.
to there's no question that Drury's a lame duck. Are they going to allow a lame duck GM make the choices? Or is he going to have to wipe the team clean so that they get guys in there that want to play for him? Because this team right now doesn't want to
I
play
don't know.
for him.
Well,
So
and that, but by
that's
the
one
way,
of my
that begs
storylines.
the question.
I don't know how far they can allow this to go. And if I'm the Dolan family right now, I'm jettisoning him tomorrow. But and taking Laviette with them and maybe take the assistant GM with him. I don't know. I'm cleaning house there. And there's no way Trotz is going to get fired, but I don't know how much longer you can let Burnett stand behind that bench either
Yeah.
with what's going on there. And I think the system's not working. He's got great players. They're not melting together, and that's on the coach. So at some point you need to make a change for the good. So there's going to be at least two more coach changes before the end of the year, maybe more. But at least those two. There's no question. And the other question would be, I can't see them doing it, but will Lindy Ruff finish the season in
No
Buffalo?
way. No way does he
So
get fired. No
yeah,
way does
so
he get
I
fired.
agree with you. It's just unfortunate what's happening there. The other storyline for me is because I wrote these down is you mentioned so we talked about it at the beginning of the season. Right now, Boston is the only team that's in a playoff position in a a fairly secure playoffs position, although they've played way more games than some other teams, at a minus 20. Like, and they're starting to peter now. They're 4-4-2 in the last 10. I'm going to say they don't make the playoffs. I'm going to be interested to see how this plays out in terms of them in the back half of the
Yeah.
season. I'm going to continue going on what we said in the Thanksgiving episode that they're not going to make the playoffs this year. They're
Yeah,
going to fall out.
I don't disagree with that. I think there's a very
So,
strong chance that they
eh,
fall apart, especially if they have any significant injuries. They're such a
right,
top heavy team. They have any significant injuries, they're screwed.
right, right. And the other one would
Uh,
be the other, and I got to talk a little bit about the Leafs in the second half of the season because there's so many storylines to
mm-hmm.
talk on. They got to get healthy. They've got to get healthy. They can't go into the playoffs with getting, we just lost McCabe again, probably just concussed tonight. Um, so we got to get healthy. But my interest in what is Trey Leaving going to do at the trade deadline? It's quite clear now that there's no way, as much as I think they should consider it, they're going to trade Marner. So are they going to risk losing him in the offseason because they can't pay him what he wants right now? There's just no way that this team can get doing it. So how is he going to add to this team and get some secondary scoring, a third or fourth line center that can add something to this team, so that they can do something in the playoffs? Because as we said up at the top, for this team, it, the regular season was not in question. Marner's ability to play in the regular season is not in question. It's all about the playoffs. And if they do not make a run, and I say a run is more than 2 rounds, they got to get to the third round. If they do not get to the third round, for me, it's a failed year. What do you do with Marner in the offseason? You can't lose him for nothing. And that's the danger. If they don't do
Yep.
something with him at the trade deadline, they can't pay him $14.5 million that he wants. What do you do? And to me, that's going to see how this is going to play out in the back half season because it has an effect too on what they do with Tavares because Tavares has already said he'll take a discount or they're leaning towards he's not going to get what he's getting now and he knows that. But he's having a tremendous season, which gives him some power. But then if you pay Marner 14 million and then you give Tavares more than he probably should get because of this great year, what do you again? We're going to fall back into the situation where they're in now. Is that third and fourth line continue to be muddy and
Mm-hmm.
non-imaginative, and the big guys aren't scoring. We're having trouble. So that to me is a huge storyline. What's going to happen through the rest of this year? And if they don't perform in the playoffs, are they risking losing Marner for nothing if they don't do something at the trade deadline? And we're not suggesting that they should trade him anymore at the trade deadline. I think they should consider it if they get a whopping return. But
Well, that's the hockey trade, right?
that's the hockey trade,
That's
right? Like, but to me, that's got to be something that sits out there. No one's talking about it right now, because he's dazzling. While Matthews is out, he stood on his head and he's done great. But we've seen this show before in the regular season. Can he play? And again, I said this that they're clearly playing a better style. And over as a team, they're playing as a better style, a little hard hitting, more checking. Can that carry them through the playoffs? Can they do something in the playoffs with this core group?
yep, yep.
And that's
Uh, look, I have a bit of a different feeling about these Leafs this year, kind of the way you do. They just seem like a different team on television.
they do
They seem they seem
at times.
more unified in their approach. But we'll see. We'll see. I have one more prediction to make before we break, unless you have anything else.
No, no, no.
Uh,
What kind
I
of
predict that we are finally going to do our television ratings episode, or at least segment, and that we have an episode coming up. I predict we're going to do a couple of episodes. I think we're going to do one with our good friend Ron. We're going to bring Ron in
we
for
got?
one.
We got to bring Ron on.
We got to
We
bring
got to
Ron
bring
in for
Ron
an
on. Yeah,
episode.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And secondly, we're going to do an entire episode on American TV coverage.
Yes, we
And
have
we
to.
can we can throw a little shade at the Canadian, especially the Sportsnet coverage while we do it, but definitely focus more on TNT
Yes.
and ESPN.
With
And
my TV background, be no,
we'll get
there'll
into
be
the nitty gritty on it.
on the ratings thing. There's no question. I'm being interested in your point of view, but being a programming guy for 30 years. I have a different take on what's going on with the ratings than I think you've got, and why it's happening. I think that we probably both agree on what's happening, but we'll leave that for that conversation because it'll be fun. It'll be interesting from both of our perspectives being on different sides of the business of why this is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, on that note, Phil, Happy New Year once again.
Happy New Year to you too.
It's been a great almost half season so
Yes.
far. Looking forward to
13th
seeing what
episode.
happens.
How did that happen? How did that
I don't
happen?
know. I don't know.
Well,
But
we've now done as many episodes as we have listeners.
yeah. Well, the good news is maybe by the 26th episode we'll have figured this out.
Absolutely. Well, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. The first half of the season will be fun. I look forward to continuing this with you. It's a chance to see you every week and talk hockey with you, and it just creates our conversations throughout the week, makes it that much more interesting and fun. And my wife always sort of laughs at me, going, "What the hell are you two talking about?" I go, "Listen to the podcast. Listen to the podcast." All right.
And then she puts it on the background to say that she's done it. I respect her for it.
Absolutely.
All
You
right,
have a
Phil,
great
have a
week,
great one.
and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.